Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Clint Grove and Learning Data Engineering with Clint Grove. Welcome to this. What I want to show you today is something that you're going to find quite often if you're deploying SQL servers and data factories and you want the data factory to be able to speak to the SQL server. In other words, read and write to that SQL server. So our objective in all these episodes, we're probably going to have more than one, maybe 2 or 3 episodes, is to have the new data factory as a user on the SQL database in DevOps so that it can read and write data. And they obviously want to promote this to the next environment. So we don't want to have to do anything manually. We want to create our SQL server, our data factory, add our data factory as a user on the SQL server through managed identity, and then read and write from there. So you'll see now that I've got a data factory up here, and you may have come across this before where you've got a linked service and you want to be able to write to your SQL server or at least talk to your SQL server. There's a few things that you need to do. Of course, we want to be able to go with system assigned and managed identity, because it's probably the best way to connect. You can obviously go through service principals or SQL authentication, but it's recommended that you use managed identity. And all you have to do is add this data factory to the SQL server as a user, and you're A for away. But there's a problem there, because if you try and do it automatically through DevOps, you're going to find that the DevOps is going to spit back an error saying to you that the SQL server cannot add this data factory from the directory in Active Directory to itself, because it doesn't have permissions, right? And you may have come across that before. And to show you, this won't actually connect at the moment because this managed identity is not yet a user on our SQL server. So our SQL server is here, and you'll see that we're going to do a whole lot of things in these episodes. One of which, we're going to create a new database role. Then we're going to add that role to this user, and this user is going to have that data factory in there. So you'll have the data factory inside the security group, and that security group will have access to this role. And that's what we want to do, so that when we do eventually click on that button, it'll be successful, and this data factory will be in that security group ready to go. But before we do any of that, you have to have your DevOps all sorted out. So if you want to do this with DevOps and follow along, what's pretty cool in this first episode, we'll just talk about how you can set this all up. If you've got Visual Studio, like I have a Visual Studio license, then you will get some credits every month to use in Azure. And here's my database solution. I'm going to create a database DAC pack, and we're going to build that in DevOps, and then we're going to deploy that in DevOps. So all pretty cool stuff here. Before you even get going, though, you'll need DevOps organization, which is free as well. So you can get a DevOps organization for free. You can release pipelines and build pipelines for free. So it's pretty cool. Just go to DevOps, dev.azure.com, and sign up for your own organization. And then once you've got an organization, then create yourself a project. And once you're in a project, the first thing you want to do is go to project settings, and you want to create yourself a service connection between DevOps and Azure. So if you've got your Azure portal, maybe you've got this Azure portal, starting £120 credits, whatever it is, or you've got a Visual Studio license, and you've got some Visual Studio, some Azure credits, then you're A for away. So you want to be able to connect your DevOps to your Azure portal, and you can do that if you logged in as yourself and you yourself have access to your Azure subscription as an owner or such, then you can create your connection from here. And all you got to do is, if you go back to, you might have like a blank page that says create your first service connection. You go new service connection, Azure Resource Manager, and then just follow the steps all the way through to connect to your Azure subscription. Okay, and then that's it. So then this service connection is going to be in your Active Directory. So let's quickly have a look at that. It's important that you have these prerequisites, as I call them, set up. So once that's done, if you come into your Active Directory and you go to your app registrations, you'll see that this is the one I created, which is this one here, is now a app registration on my Active Directory. All right, so it's a service principal which is connecting my Azure portal to my DevOps. And this very same service app registration actually has, have a look at this. It has the role assignment of contributor, which you'll see in a second. There you go, contributor on my subscription. Therefore, a contributor can create resources, create resource groups, and do a whole lot of cool stuff. Okay, so it's quite a high level of access. That's so what you want to do to set this whole thing up, in order to create a factory, create a SQL Server, do all that fancy work, and promote it from environment to environment, there's only a few things you have to do initially to set it all up so that you can not worry about each environment and how it'll work. So go to your Active Directory. This is the first thing you're going to do. You're going to go to Roles and Administrators, and then you're going to go to Directory Readers. Now, I'm going to tell you why you're going to do this. You want to add this DevOps connection that you have to the directory readers. The reason is, later on, as we go along, we're going to have this piece of code, and I'll drag it into the screen for you, where it's going to go and do this. It's going to add a member, like an object ID, which is going to be your data factory name, because your data factory becomes a managed identity, which has its own object ID. You want to add that to a security group, right? And so DevOps is going to do that. And DevOps is going to use that service connection that we just spoke about. So that's why we need DevOps to be a directory reader. So that's the first thing you're going to do. Then the next thing you do is create some groups. And, excuse me, these groups can be SQL admins like this. So you're going to have there, I've got this as a SQL admin, that service connection in my SQL admin. Now you can use these SQL admins across all of your SQL servers, but you may not want to put it into production, of course. This depends on what your scenario is. You may not want that service principal to be a admin in your production environment, but then you can if you understand how to do this, you'll understand other ways to make that not happen and still make the whole thing work. Okay, so if I go back to what I want to do in my ARM template is going to add this group as a admin onto my SQL Server, and that happens automatically. So you can see that if I'm just switch back to my SQL Server is going to have the SQL admins added on there. So that happens in my ARM template, and my ARM template is here. And so if I just look for SQL admins, there it is. So I say to my ARM template, here it is. If we just write this, if we just find this, by the way, you should be able to find it. So there it is. When you create your server, and if you know what type these are, you've got a SQL Server administrators, and then you can add in your Active Directory and add that SQL. Basically, what this is doing is adding that security group to this part of your SQL Server. Okay, so we're going to have to just carry on because I can't pause. Right, so we've got our SQL admins. Coded into the ARM template is adding the security group to the AAD, which is cool. And the reason you have to do that, sorry, to actually get to the point, is that when you deploy your DAC pack, which is your database solution, this service connection is going to be doing that. So you need to then get a token. Your token is going to come from here, and this is going to be in my GitHub, and hopefully I'll make this public to you guys, and you can take all of this code and sort of deploy it onto your own. But it's good to watch this video because then you're going to know how to set up your DevOps in order to make this happen, because there's certain things that have to come from your DevOps, like this service connection, for example, comes from your DevOps, right? And you'll see that we get a token over here. This is a PowerShell script inline, and we're getting a token using our agent, our build agent in DevOps, which connects to Azure through obviously that account, that service account, that app registration, and then this goes and gets a token for that database, and then it uses that token later on over here. You'll see it there. So yeah, so all very complicated. Probably spend a whole day on trying to teach this, but basically what I'll do is I'll make this code available through GitHub, and you can sort of look at it in more detail. But just to get to the crux of it, this is all about adding a user in your Active Directory to the SQL Server, and that's the big thing, because it won't allow you unless you put in the correct permission. So for this video, we're just going to end it there. We just make sure that you've done all the prerequisites, which is creating your Azure DevOps. You've got your service connection, and then your service connection is going to be added to you. You should make the security group first. So first of all, you're going to make your service connection. Then you're going to add your service connection as a directory reader. Okay. So I showed you what we want to achieve. Then we're setting up our DevOps, creating our security group, make sure your SQL admin is good. Okay. So basically, I'll just run through it again, which is add your service connection, DevOps, to your directory reader. Okay. First thing you're going to do. And then let's put that reader there. And then you got to create some SGs, should we call them, security groups, and then like add your DevOps connection to the SQL admin SG. Okay, and then the other SGs are maybe did not mention, which is if you go here, create these other groups. So what you want to do is create these groups called like SQL data writers, or data writers might not be the right word because data writers can't actually read data. But if you want to read and write, you want to maybe call it SQL data writers and readers -test, and then -dev, -ppe, whatever. Because you're going to add your data. Basically, the members inside here are going to, is one of the members inside here is going to be your data factory. And your data factory is going to be a member of this group, and we're going to add this group, you'll see here in a second here, to the SQL Server, which I've already done because I've obviously run this a few times, and we're going to give it that role. So that's the whole thing that we want to do. So, but the first thing you have to do, you can't automate this. Well, I mean, you can, but you don't want to. So if you're doing a project for some company, you want to ask them to set up these groups. You want to create the SQL admin group and all the different groups for the different environments. So this can be added to all your SQL servers, and then as the admin, and then you want your data factories to be in there, because you don't want to add your data factory as a SQL admin. Not necessarily. Okay, that's a bit overkill. Rightio. So that's what we've achieved now. So until the next episode, we'll be talking about how we actually make all this happen in the code. All right, thanks for joining. My name is Clint Grove. Learn data engineering with Clint. Thanks for joining us.